Well, hello, slingers. Welcome back to another Wordslinger podcast. And Memoir is in the air again. We seem to always loop back to memoirs these days, but talking to a wonderful woman and her incredible memoir in this episode, so stick around.
It's the Wordslinger podcast, where story matters. Build your brand, write your book, redefine who you are. It's all about the story here. What's yours? Now, here's the guy who invented pants optional, Kevin Tomlinson, the Wordslinger.
Wordslinger.
Well, I am Kevin Tomlinson, the Wordslinger, the writer _ if you're following me on Substack, which I hope you are. I hope you are following me on Substack at kevintomlinson.substack.com. That's where all the real action's happening these days. I'm really getting into it. I talked about this in the last episode, my whole all-in on Substack strategy, and that's been happening. Here's a fun fact, by the way. I've already recorded this episode a couple of times, and I had glitched a few times, and then when I went to do it, I was doing it perfectly, and I looked up, and my microphone was not plugged in. So here we are again. I guess that's a sign from the universe. We're gonna jump right into this interview with Sally McQuillen. Her memoir is actually about her experience. Let me dial that back, because it is in some ways about her experience, but more so it's about this wild child son of hers, and sort of the impact of losing him, the grief, but also more to the point, his story. And I think that's what I love about memoir is, you can explore all these sort of universal themes with your story, and it provides a way for us to connect as humans, which is I think one of the most important things for authors to do, especially now in this age of AI, connecting with each other in a human capacity. Sally is a psychotherapist, and so that influences some of her storytelling, but the memoir itself is a very human look at all of this. So can't wait for you to meet her. Stick around. And at the end of this, I'm going to be talking about some ideas and decisions and pivots I'm doing when it comes to the Wordslinger podcast, and sort of what's happening for me in the world of podcasting. So you're going to want to stick around for that too. So stick around for the note at the end. And otherwise, enjoy this interview with Sally McQuillen. Hey, it's Kevin Tomlinson here, and I want to talk to you about something that's made a real difference in my work over the years, and that is Pro Writing Aid. I've been using this for years. It's hands down the best assistive editing tool that I've found, and what I love most is that it works wherever I write. So whether I'm in Scrivener, Microsoft Word, Substack, or anywhere else, Pro Writing Aid is right there with me. And unlike other tools, I get control over the kind of suggestions it gives me, so there's no rigid rules. It's just smart, actionable feedback that's tailored to my writing. And the best part is that the team behind Pro Writing Aid actually cares about independent writers and creators. They're focused on helping individual creators like you and me, not just big enterprise customers. And that is, unfortunately, becoming a kind of rare thing these days. And that's why I'm proud to support them. So if you're serious about leveling up your writing wherever or however you write, go to prowritingaid.com and use the code KEVIN20 at checkout for 20% off of your subscription. That's prowritingaid.com, code KEVIN20. And trust me, you'll be glad you did. Well, I'm always glad to talk to new and emerging writers and people who maybe done some of this stuff for a while. I'm always happy to talk to writers, but I am talking today to Sally McQuillen, who was introduced to me by a former guest of the show. Happy to chat with you, Sally. Welcome to the Wordslinger podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be with you. And I was thinking about all the different things that we could talk about. And one of the things that I heard you mentioning is that, and I don't know in what context it was, but it was something about how the way you write is fueled by the fact that you kind of like to be wild and adventurous.
Yeah.
Does that sound like you and your
That sounds a
writing?
little like me. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
I'm a
and
pantser, as they call it. I write by the seat of my
yes.
pants. Yeah.
Well, I am very affectionate toward anyone who operates that way, to include my husband and um, both of my sons. And what I wrote about is, so my book is called Reaching for Beautiful, a
Yeah.
memoir of loving and losing a wild child. And my Christopher was very much a wild child. And I just have this gravitation towards handfuls. So that in and of itself was just
You're in the
making
right
me
place.
chuckle. I'm in the right place. I'm in the right place. I'm ready to go and appreciate Julie connecting us
Yeah.
and she, yeah,
So,
she's a part of my writing story.
oh, that's good. And that's Julie
Hmm.
Fingers, who was on for a previous episode. For those watching or listening, make sure you go back and find that episode. I always love chatting with her. But so you've got quite a background, and I don't even know what some of the letters mean behind your name. But you're a psychotherapist, and you have a private practice. That's a new one. I don't think I've had a private practice
Oh, you haven't
psychotherapist on the show
had a
before.
therapist on the show. Well, when I compare myself to my friend Julie, who is a member of my writing group, she is more of what I consider to be a true writer. And I am, she has a history of being in journalism, and she's just put out her first memoir, Stay.
Hmm.
And I have never written before. I was an English and dance major in college, and I loved to write poetry at that time. And I actually had some incredible writing teachers at my little liberal arts school in Ohio. And it wasn't until losing my son that I began to write. I actually started writing about 21 days after he died. A Facebook friend of mine suggested journaling, and
Mm,
that idea had been suggested to me many times and promptly disregarded. And in this case, it just worked for me. I began writing to Chris on my phone,
mm,
and fast forward, coincidentally or not, another person who attended my little liberal arts college in Ohio is also the founder of Haven Writing Retreats. Laura Munson is her name, and
mhm.
she and I talked about this strange possibility of whether or not what I was writing could become a book.
Yeah.
And so that's where everything began. And I have, just loved the process of writing ever since.
Yeah. So that's so I'm a big fan of journaling. Like I have dozens of them. I don't know why I'm so obsessed with it. Within reach right now, Sally, I'm counting 6 different journals that I keep up
Really.
regularly. So that's a practice I highly endorse. What was it about that though that I mean, the fact that it led to the book is that's good, and I think there's a through line there we can explore. But what was it about the process itself that was helpful to you?
It was funny because it wasn't until I showed up at this writing retreat in the woods of Montana and started to share what I was doing and the prospect of turning it into a memoir that one of the other members of the group said, "Hey, this is no surprise that you have been writing on your phone in this way. It's like you're texting your son."
Yeah,
And it makes sense, doesn't it? I was floundering. My world had been devastated and rocked, and I was beginning to search for, and make sense of, like, where was my child?
Yeah.
Where had he gone? And so something about letting him into how I was feeling, um, and then so part of what kind of derived from this was that I thought, if I can help other people get an inside look into my grief, that could be a reason to put a book in the world.
Yeah.
But also, I wanted to capture my son's life, and I wanted to keep his spirit, very much alive and not forget, because here I am in my 50s when I'm beginning on this long writing journey. And it took me 7 years to do,
Oh,
in
yeah.
many drafts. Hmm. I
Yeah.
didn't know that that was par for the course. You'd probably tell me that, Kevin.
Well, it just depends, but I mean, given the nature of what you were creating, I could see why that would be. Yeah, and I love that idea that it was effectively like sending text messages to your son. That's interesting because I use I've written entire novels on my phone,
Have you?
mostly as a kind of experiment, but yes, thumbs and all, like I've done it. So I'm a big advocate for
Yes.
that. Yeah. The write
It
anywhere
took some
approach.
time to kind of, yes, and I still do go back to making notes on my phone, and then it took some time to, and look, my first draft was, and being a therapist, full time, and being a feeler, you wouldn't have wanted to necessarily read my first draft. It was pure emotion.
Yeah. Yeah. What was the process like then for mining the more polished book from that?
Yes, it required numerous drafts. My writing group was an essential ingredient to helping me through the process. And then I took a number of courses and tried to develop my craft, because I grew to appreciate the importance of being able to write in scene, incorporate dialogue, bring what had happened to life. And so it set the first year plus after Chris passed away, but then I'm reflecting on his entire life and what it was like to raise him.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't imagine losing a child. I've got a lot of friends who have. Uh, it's just such, I don't know, it's such a huge impact. I just can't fathom it. I don't have kids of my own. It's just not something that's in my head. But the fact that you were able to turn it into something, and so now you have this book. Do you have an objective for the book? I mean, you talked a little about, maybe it could help others. Is that kind of the point now?
It really is. I felt as if my writing was so healing. It enabled me to process and reconcile a lot of what happens naturally in
Hmm.
grief, all of the guilt about not being able to save my son,
Yeah.
prevent the outcome, and then all of the lessons that he has taught me and raising him taught me. So I did end up feeling like I had more to impart, not just exclusively to parents who have lost children.
Yeah.
Those are going to be predominantly my audience, I would think, but to anyone who's also raised a child that's different in any way.
Yeah.
And there is an addiction through line in this story. So
Mm.
it's also about breaking a legacy of addiction and trying to find a way to get beyond fear
Yeah.
and celebrate love.
Yeah. Yeah. How much do you think your background in psychotherapy, influenced the way the story works?
Very little.
Really?
Well, the only influence I would say that it had, maybe more than I think, just because I'm such a natural feeler, and so mostly though, if you look at my story and Christopher's story, I was out of my league. I didn't know I didn't know what was happening.
Yeah.
I didn't know, I wasn't necessarily um, cued into what, even though I'd recovered from addiction myself, raising a child with addiction was a whole different can of worms. And so much of what I learned along the way, and much of what I've come through personally informs my work. So it's almost hard to separate all of these out. Um, but I do think there's a spiritual element to
Yeah.
what I'm trying to impart, um, and that there's also some advocacy around mental health and
Mm.
addiction that I'm sure I'm trying to impart a little bit as well, that comes from being a therapist who specializes in addiction, grief, and trauma.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, well, no, that is one of the things that, there's going to be an overlap for everyone in some sense, is that we all have to deal with grief and trauma at some point in our lives. Whether it's a child or a parent or a sibling or a friend or whatever, and all of us have lost somebody. You know,
That's right.
what kind of advice could you offer? Let's loop a little, because let's say, because this process of writing the book by journaling, um, what sort of advice might you offer somebody for, you know, kind of copying that technique? Like, because a lot of times I think it's people, I've talked to people recently about journaling, for example, who say, I never know what to write. And so I always start and stall, you know. So,
Yes.
what's your advice to someone like that if they want to do this?
I I love being able to start in the moment that you're in and check in with yourself. It's a call to check in, which is what any therapist actually, here's the
Yeah.
therapy part. What any therapist would recommend is to sort of take space and time away from your daily busyness
Yeah.
and reflect on how you're doing. And and one of the things that I loved about writing and continue to love about it, and love about writing my newsletter that I'm currently writing on Substack, is that it's this incredible opportunity to try to articulate what's happening inside. And one of my objectives, I think, used to be to ensure that other people were understanding what was happening inside me, because I think I present one way and might be feeling differently. And I also love this thing about grief because it's not necessarily visible to others. So trying to help other people see what might be going on inside the heart of someone who's lost someone dear to them,
Hmm.
and then trying to sort of destigmatize some of the discomfort around it and promote people being able to better acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Um, so I do think that journaling is just a beautiful gift you give to yourself, and that it can also be a conversation to letting other people into what you've discovered is happening internally.
Yeah. Can I ask you maybe a more technical question about, what did you actually use on your phone to do the journaling? Well, like, what app did you use?
I think I literally was writing in notes.
Okay.
I mean, I started off just any which way I could.
Yeah.
And then, ultimately, moved everything over to my laptop.
Okay. Yeah, I'm always curious. Everyone's got their sort of preferred method. I use, there's an app called Day One, but then the app, I've been using that for years, but then Apple went and created a journaling app for for the phone. So I was just curious. Uh,
Yes.
what do you think you learned, about yourself in that process? You clearly you processed the grief. That's a big part of this, but like, was there a surprising thing that you learned about yourself when in the middle of this?
Yes. I I learned that it really is in our I learned firsthand that it is in our darkest moments that that's where light shines in. That that and my son actually really pulled me in the direction of a spiritual course that has helped me. And I had a spiritual foundation, but
Yeah.
it's really helped me learn how to think about um, the challenges that we all inevitably go through and face, and how to cope with those and move through them. um, Christopher is a source of strength for me, so I feel like I have the
Yeah.
added advantage of his spirit always cheerleading me along. But there is this really, it's sort of everything crystallized just as it does. You get this perspective, and in order to survive this, how do you really best want to live? And how do you
Mhm.
want to, where do you want to choose to focus your attention?
Yeah. Now you mentioned you were part of a writers group. How much of a role did that group play in this process for you?
It was really huge for me because it kept me accountable.
Yeah.
I am not typically, I'm a little bit of what my writing group has deemed to be a secret rebel.
Yeah.
So I'm not necessarily a joiner. And they pulled me right in. And once I committed to them and to meeting with them regularly, I also committed to my writing practice.
Yeah.
And I had to determine where I could fit that in with my otherwise, I have two living children who I adore, and I had to give time to all sorts of different things, including just honoring my grief and working. So this had to be a sidecar that
Mm.
it wasn't my first, but I really took it seriously and tried to write it as best I could.
Yeah, I'm a not so secret rebel. I have a hard time with I can't find a writers group, honestly. I mean, I've tried in the past, and it just there's a there's a problem of levels for me. Where I've been doing this for quite a while, and so it's hard to find someone who's sort of, you definitely want to try to get together with people who are at sort of at a higher level than you so they can help pull you
Yes.
up, but they at least need to be at approximately the same level as you in order for it to be beneficial to you. How did you end up finding your writing group?
It was a fluke, and it happened by virtue of being pulled together in the second writing retreat that I attended in Montana with Laura Munson. And a number of us who decided to write memoirs were renegades in a way. We began to
Yeah,
kind of form our own. We would just go to each other's homes and workshop 30 pages at a time. And
yeah,
what that did was it created this incredible intimacy for us. Here we were, all middle-aged women, and not surprisingly appreciating many things that we had in common. And um, you know, my fellow writers like Julie had more experience as writers, and so I
yeah,
got to be the luckiest one, and I just let them pull me along. But I also think we were just so fortunate in that each of us were both able to take the time to support each other and validate what was happening. Um, as we wrote emotionally, as we faced different challenges, and then also call each other out.
Yeah.
So there's that sort of tough love piece of it. There's that, and this is a very loving group of women, but there was also times when we had established enough trust that, you know, Julie, for example, could turn to me, and she did, and say, "Hey, wait a minute. I don't like where this particular draft is taking you."
Hmm. That's
Um,
interesting. That's very
mhm,
interesting. And
mhm.
that's where my not so secret rebelliousness would kick in because I'm like, I would fight that.
Oh, trust me, I did initially fight. I sort of initially fought the first time that I brought them my completed draft and
Yeah.
was naive enough to think that, there was um more there. I didn't appreciate just what a journey this would be.
Yeah.
And so they had to be honest with me about what it needed. And I worked with several different editors along the way, and one took me in one particular direction that my writing group didn't support. And so part of the growing through this for me was also determining where to stick to my own guns, Kevin, and
Hmm.
then where to, you sort of like, wait a minute, I've got so much loyalty to my son, and so much loyalty, so much of a commitment to this. Where can I, and ultimately I had to really overhaul it. And
Yeah.
this is, I guess, part of the nature of how this goes, but it was really great to have them help me along the way.
Now you this was this I don't know how to describe this actually, I guess, but this you joined up with She Writes Press, right?
Yes, and
Yeah.
and ultimately the editor that I ended up using was Brooke Warner,
Yeah.
who is one, and so I am such a fan. Working with her enabled everything that had come before that to gel in a way that felt like magic.
Yeah.
She really helped me see. I just had some aha moments that I hadn't. I was a newbie to the craft of writing, other than that which I'd gotten in college many years before.
Yeah. I had her on the show years ago, like in the pre-COVID days, years and years ago.
Okay,
So
yes.
yeah, she's wonderful. Yeah. So that were you when you set out to do this? I mean, was your expectation that you were gonna find someone like or find a group like She Writes Press or whatever? Did you ever consider like in self-publishing, or was this always something you were going to put in front of a traditional publisher?
Given everything else that I have on my plate, I couldn't imagine
Yeah.
sort of embarking on the self-publishing journey. And so, admittedly, I had no idea what the expense of publishing in general, and I again was naive about all of the expense, but
Yeah.
of publishing. I didn't think that I had the kind of platform, and especially in the changing landscape of publishing, to go the traditional publishing route. I never even had any illusions that that's the direction I would go. And this ended up being the perfect fit for me, is to go with a hybrid publisher.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's an interesting thing. I'm still kind of exploring the whole hybrid landscape. It's actually everything keeps changing. Everybody keeps changing everything on me. You
So quickly, so quickly.
know.
It's really hard to get your bearings, isn't it?
Right. Just as soon as you learn something about the publishing industry, suddenly that thing doesn't exist anymore, or it's completely different than it was.
Exactly. And one of the beautiful things about She Writes Press is to be connected to a cohort of other women. So I sort
Yeah.
of felt like many of whom hadn't had what I'd had the privilege of having with my writing group preceding that.
Yeah.
So just to be able to come together and have a sense of community, I do recommend it, Kevin.
Well, I'm going to keep working on the the actual writing group part. I've got writer friends. That's about as close as I get. We all hang out, get
There
coffee
it
or whatever.
is.
That's better for me anyway. I don't need them looking at my stuff. So, did you enjoy this experience enough that you are going to do another book?
It is possible that I am. If I do, it will be probably, and that's why when you asked me about, how much of my therapist part was
Yeah.
directing this memoir, I think I would do it along the lines of a self-help book. That would be something I'd be
Interesting.
more inclined to do in the future. But this is really this is something that, had it not been a labor of love, I don't know, had it not been in honor of my son,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd have had the persistence to go to. I'm amazed. It's sort of like I feel about having given birth to children. Like,
Yeah.
everybody does this. So many people do this. They put books out into the world. Who knew what it could entail?
Yes. And okay, so the book, Reaching for Beautiful, it's releasing on April 1st, 2025. You had a special
Correct.
story for me though when we first logged on together about that month. You want to share that?
Yes. Christopher was born in 1994 on April 15th, tax day. And he arrived in his inimitable, exhilarating, excruciating way, just really just fast. And to be able to give birth to this memoir during the same month that he was born, it feels like such a gift.
Yeah.
Um, and to think that he would be 30 is just mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is really something I'm super excited about. It is something that can be pre-ordered. It's distributed through Simon and Schuster and available at wherever books are sold.
All right. And so, yeah, I'm looking at it right now. It's listing on Amazon and elsewhere. So, it looks like they can just go to your website to shortcut all this. Go to sarahmcquillen.com, which will be in the show notes. So,
Yes, we'll go to Sally McQuillen, even
I'm
though my formal name is Sarah.
I'm
So, in
sorry.
case that, yes,
That was a skip in my brain. I apologize.
I know
Sally
I love it
McQuillen.
because I don't often hear myself referred to as Sarah
I
unless I'm
don't
in
know where that
trouble.
came from. That was a weird little coincidence.
No, Sally is a nickname for Sarah. So yes,
Must
so
be what
go
it
to
is.
my website and you can get my book there. Thank you for having me, and thank you for anyone who's considering reading what is not necessarily an easy story to move through, but one that
Yeah.
I hope inspires.
I can already tell it's gonna be a mover. So, and I'm gonna have to read it with tissues nearby. I can already tell.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Sally, for being on the show. Everyone paying attention right now, whether you're watching or listening, make sure you go to sallymcquillen.com. Find the link in the show notes. The book is Reaching for Beautiful. It's available for pre-order right now everywhere fine books are sold. Releasing Tuesday, April 1st. The best kind of April Fool's joke is
Yes.
one you play on your wallet. All right. So thank you all.
All right.
And for everybody tuning in, make sure you stick around for the note at the end, which is coming up. You don't want to miss it. See you then. You know, I've always believed life's too short for boring stories. So I write the kind of books I'd want to read. Action-packed, fast-paced fiction. Adventure stories with characters you'll wish you could hang out with. And twists you'll never see coming. From ancient mysteries to modern-day thrills, my books take you on a wild ride. And trust me, I've got plenty of rides to choose from. So if you're ready to escape into a world of danger, discovery, and intrigue, it's here waiting. Find your adventure at kevintumlinson.com/books. Not responsible for sleepless nights. Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Sally McQuillen, and I hope you rush right out and buy her memoir. That part of this is all about supporting the people who come on the show. But here's something. So I did a solo slinger episode last week, and it ended up being one of the biggest engagement shows that I've had in a while. And that seems to happen every time I do a solo slinger show, where it's just me talking to you. People comment, people come out of the woodwork to make comments and support me and, give me great feedback. That doesn't seem to happen nearly as much with the interviews. Now, I know some of you really do enjoy the interviews, especially when I get bigger names in the show. And by the way, because you stuck around for the note at the end, next week I'm actually interviewing author Steve Barry again. He's been on the show a couple of times. Unless something falls through, I don't make promises that I have no control over, but I'm supposed to be interviewing him, and I'm hoping I can actually have that episode ready to go for you next week. It'll be a rush job, but I think it's going to be worth it. But, I'm always going to bring people on this show, but I think I'm going to dial back on how often I do it, and I think I'm going to change my approach. Because here's the deal. So I'm a co-host on the Writers Inc. podcast with J.D. Barker and Christine Daigle and Jenna Brown, which is we do an interview format on that show, and then there's the hosts. We like to talk. That's my favorite part of that show is all of us talking and discussing the interview and that sort of thing. But I do interviews with authors on that show. I interview people for the Author Nation podcast sometimes. I'm talking to somebody this afternoon who wants to launch a podcast and wants me as the host, and that'll be an interview format. I do interviews with people for other projects outside of podcasting. I do a lot of interviews, and I think they're valuable. Because of this podcast and the interviews I've done over the years, it's been a benefit to me in my career, in my life. I've made a lot of lifelong friends and connections because of the podcasting. My career has advanced in various ways because of it. I became the voice of publishing because of all this. The interviews have helped me a lot. I learn from them. I grow from them. I make connections. My network grows from it. But everything I do tends to, in this space at least, tends to involve doing interviews. This show, the Wordslinger podcast, I've got an opportunity here. I mean, I've talked about this almost since I've relaunched, that I wanted to do kind of a pivot. And there's various things I've tried. Some of it's worked, some of it hasn't. That's the way things are in any business. And I love bringing on old friends. You may not know this. I've said it before. I've mentioned this before in previous episodes. But when I relaunched this show in late 2024, after like a 4-year hiatus, I did it secretly because I had never given the show its final season or its final episode. And so what I did was relaunch with the intention that I was going to bring on some old guests, a few new ones, but some who'd been on the show previously. And I was going to, do that for a while, and then I was going to announce in there that was the official last season, and then I'd do a few episodes to wrap up, and I was going to call it quits with Wordslinger podcast because I felt like I'd done everything I'd set out to do with the show. I had put it on pause because of burnout after 2020. I was just going to end it. I was just going to wrap it up. But thankfully, something happened, and I started to realize that, first of all, I started getting feedback from people, who were listening. And then I started to feel like I was still gaining something from it. But there's been this dis-ease, not disease, but dis-ease, this unease, I guess is a better way to say it. Feeling like there must be something else I can do with the show that will benefit me, benefit you. And after doing a few of these solo slinger episodes, I think I've got something I'm going to try. What I'm going to do is dial back on interviews. Now, if you are loving the interviews, if that's a big component for you, if that's why you tune in, let me know that. Say something in the comments on YouTube, or go to my website at kevintomlinson.com and click the contact button, or better yet, go to my Substack page, Substack or kevintomlinson.substack.com, and I think you can tag me if nothing else. I think you can leave me some information there. But let me know what you think of that. But here's what I'm thinking. I'm still going to do interviews. I'm still going to bring in, especially when I've got someone kind of a big name with something I think that you will benefit from. Even if they're not a big name, if I think it's something you can benefit from, I'll bring these people on. But I'm thinking, based on the responses I get from the episodes where it's just me talking, that maybe there's something there to explore. So I'm going to try that for a while. I'm just going to dial back on the number of guest episodes and start doing more solo episodes and see what we get. Because I realized, I subscribe to a lot of folks on YouTube and on podcasts that are it's just them and me. It's not there's rarely an interview or guest, and so I'm there for that personality. I'm there to learn from their experience and their perspective. And it feels more personal to me. So I think that is something I'm gonna concentrate on for a while. You let me know. Is that something you're interested in? I'm going to do it regardless for a while at least and see how it goes. But I think we can have some fun with this. So, and I tune into people who are talking about their expertise. Somebody who's doing videography or photography, or they're doing writing, or they're doing, archaeology or something like that. I have a wide array of interests that I could discuss and I like to discuss. And, sometimes that means having to bring on a guest, and sometimes it means I'd rather just sit and talk to you about it. So let's see how it plays out. Let's see what happens. But beyond that, I just want to produce a show that, one, is valuable to you, but two, is valuable to me, that makes me feel like I'm contributing something and feel like I'm also gaining something. So that's what we're going to do. So not that big a pivot really, but it is. This show's a great format for me to kind of experiment and try things out. And I guess you'll let me know one way or another, maybe with subscriber numbers, if you're enjoying it. But comments are always appreciated and always welcome. And I try to respond to everything. So I get behind on YouTube. I don't know why. I just can't seem to catch up on YouTube. I can't seem to keep caught up on YouTube when it comes to comments, but I'm working on it. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up now. I know this is a little shorter than usual, but lots of big things happening. I'm going to make some announcements in the future, some things that I can't quite discuss just yet, but you're going to be excited about what's coming, and I can't wait for you to hear one thing in particular, one piece of news in particular. I'm waiting until I've got a call this afternoon. In fact, I keep looking up at the clock. I've got a call in about 10 minutes to discuss this. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Wordslinger podcast. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe wherever you are, YouTube, podcasts, or wherever. And more importantly, go check me out where all the action is happening. Check out the writer _ that's my newsletter and blog on Substack. Go to kevintomlinson.substack.com. And that's where you're going to find, that's where the real work, my real writing is happening, a real exploration of the world around me. Consider it a continuous note at the end. So go check that out. Thank you again for tuning in. God bless you. I hope you're having a wonderful 2025, and I hope it just keeps getting better for you. So take care.